Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Dormroom Diplomacy podcast. I am your host, Jack, joined as usual by my good friend Matthew.
Howdy.
And today will be a departure from the story time episodes that we have put out previously. We were kind of trying to get a little feel for things, how we wanted to go about doing this podcast. And this is where we get into the real meat and potatoes, as some would say,
Getting into the
um,
thick of it.
of what we kind of really want to talk about on this. And more of a dissection of issues circulating about the interwebs. Just kind of talking things through to kind of help us understand things better, and hopefully that translates to a better understanding for our listeners. But maybe not, and maybe we're just talking out our ass. But I'd like to think that we present at least a somewhat intellectual point of view on a majority of these
Hopefully.
topics, right?
Hopefully.
And today we have the lovely Inflation Reduction Bill that has recently been passed by the Biden administration. And right off the bat, I'm just curious. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on what you think of the implementation of this legislation, as well as what kind of effects you think it, might have going forward. Just generally speaking.
I mean, inflation as, clearly has been a big part of a lot of people's lives over the past, I don't know, year-ish, maybe a little bit less time than that, as things have been changing. But I mean, something had to happen. I'm not quite sure that this is the way to fix it. But,
Mhm.
we should definitely get into our thoughts on how maybe we think it could be better, but, I don't think the current way that they're putting stuff out there to implement it is the way that I would have chosen.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's obvious that, everyone wants inflation to be dealt with. And
Mhm.
it's not a matter of, you know, bad, I guess, motivations or poor intent. You know, in politics, you gotta say the right thing, and you gotta intend for the right thing to happen. But that doesn't mean the way you go about doing it has to work in any way whatsoever.
Right, exactly.
Which is, a little foreshadowing onto my view of the whole situation. As I believe, like, sure, if this bill did what it said, which is, deal with inflation, drive inflation down, and promote, the lowering of like pharmaceuticals, taking some power away from big pharma,
Yeah, exactly.
as well as like creating incentives for environmental, research and development. If it did all of those things with minimal downside, this would be the greatest bill in the history of bills, and it'd be nothing but praises. But under the shiny headlines and the nice little cover is a pretty ugly reality of what this is introducing,
Yeah.
uh, and it, in my opinion, is going to very much hurt a lot of the people it's kind of designed to help.
I agree
Um,
with you there, for sure.
which just really makes me wonder. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're just getting to a point where it doesn't even matter what people say anymore. There's just such a low degree of accountability that it's like,
Right.
oh, anything goes. As long as it sounds good, it must be good. It's like,
Exactly. I read some of the, some of the incentives in the bill itself, and I'm just like, is this actually going to happen? Is this actually going to be enforced? Because, like you said,
yeah.
there's some great things. I mean, just for instance, taking the power away from big pharma, that's great.
Hmm.
It's going to help a lot of people. I don't
Yeah.
know if it gets enforced on a level that's significant, though.
Right. So yeah, it's a tricky situation, But to kind of introduce the bill as a whole for anyone who's unfamiliar, it's basically a slimmed down version of the Build Back Better bill that has been trying to be pushed by the current administration for months now. I think it's like almost 8 months or something. It's been kind of a long process, and it's finally gone through as an executive order from President Biden, which is its own can of worms because that obviously an executive order means nothing
Right.
when the next administration rolls around. But we can get into that later if we want,
For
when
sure,
we're
for
kind of
sure.
talking about the long term effects of this. But to kind of just cover the bullet points, the proposed, I guess, changes, or what this bill is seeking to accomplish, I guess, is first of all, it's an extension of the Affordable Care Act, and for a lot of people, that's great news. Although the only difficulty is it only extends it for 2 years. Newsflash, in 2 years we have an election, believe it or not, where this problem is just going to be dumped onto the next administration,
Oh,
regardless of
absolutely.
party. It's something that is going to need to be dealt with rather than addressing the problem now and cutting it off at the pass. We're going with the typical political tactic of make it someone else's problem. I would I would imagine you can gather what my sentiment is about that.
Right.
It's just like, come on. I mean,
It's
but at the same time, like, I say that, but it's like, okay, but why wouldn't you? It's so, that's the easiest way to do it. It's like you extend something that it does help a lot of people.
right.
A lot of people rely on affordable healthcare, and extending the access to that makes you look good. And then if you don't have to deal with it when your term's over, then there's no negative. And it's like
Yeah,
it's just
for
a it just yeah, I mean it's just another piece of
for
the
the
broken
administration,
system.
it's great.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah,
Which
I
yeah.
I just think it's kind of a Band-Aid fix for the problem from a, more societal,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
standpoint. Like, it's a step in the right direction. We're trying to fix something, but you're just Band-Aiding over it,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't even say it's a fix. I mean, it's literally just delaying the inevitable. And
Right.
that being said, like I understand why. Not that it's the morally correct thing or the politically correct thing. Like I understand why it makes sense practically, but yes, from a you know societal standpoint of trying to better our country as a whole, it's like can we just try to deal with the problem in the first place?
And the thing is there's not gonna I mean, at least my guess is that there's probably not gonna be some sort of congressional law that gets signed in that's of sorts that this way that both parties would agree on in
Yeah,
Congress
I
at
mean it's
this
just
current climate.
right. It's such a divided partisan issue that like how can you come to a resolution on that either side's going to be happy with? So it just makes
I
it difficult.
It's the great question of politics, right?
Truly, truly. So yeah, I don't
Um,
know.
but, so the bill itself, or not bill, but the act itself, order is I read $750 billion initiative. Just for a little bit of context on, how much this is going to cost us. What's
Yeah,
your opinion on that part?
I mean, for starters, it's an exorbitant amount of capital that doesn't come from nowhere, believe it or not. Guess who pays for that? It's your taxpayers. It's
Yep.
it's everyone in the workforce, baby, and it's disproportionately affecting those people found within kind of your middle tax brackets, which
Mhm.
that to me is one of the most shocking parts about this entire thing. Is it's like, okay, you want to introduce something that hammers down all these initiatives. You're getting to make progress in all these different areas. It's like, sure, that's great. Where's the money coming from? Like, doesn't come out of nowhere.
No,
And
exactly.
the whole thing is aimed at trying to, help those that are, less well off. and it ends up just really hurting some of the, hardest working sector of the population.
Right, right. 'Cause, uh, specifically, I know it's gonna affect everyone to some extent, some
Oh
more than
yeah.
others, but there's a specific provision where it incorporates a 15% minimum tax on corporate profits. Um, that's
Right.
a big can of worms right there. You
Yeah, and so it's just kind of absurd. It's the cutoff they make is any corporation with at least $1 billion in income has a minimum tax rate of 15%. And so here's the thing, okay? The economy, right? It's a very important aspect of the United States as a sovereign nation, okay? And our economy, because we are a capitalist country, relies very heavy on the free market, okay? And these corporations are what make up the free market. And so I really just fail to understand how, in order to try and, gain money or, capital, let's say, to invest into these initiatives, why take it from, the companies that your economy so desperately depends on, especially
Right, right.
in a, a market like we're in right now. It's like we're not in, you know, this crazy bull market where everything's just, on the up and up. It's like we're, you know, in my opinion, we're yet to see the worst of this current recession we're in. And yes, it is a recession. I don't care. I don't care about us trying not to define the term because we don't want to make ourselves feel bad.
It just seems entirely counterintuitive. Um,
Yeah, and so like I honestly am not against, raising the tax rate on individuals and households in a proportionately higher tax bracket, or certain qualifications. We can kind of talk about creating more of a nuanced system to kind of pinpoint those areas where it would make sense to kind of take some of this money.
right,
But
right.
trying to take it from these corporations that are the lifeblood of the economy that our country depends on to kind of keep its, stance in global trade. It's like it's just kind of undermining the financial security of the country. And it's like,
It Yeah,
yeah, I don't know.
exactly, and these companies, I mean, they're providing crucial services for, like, all of
Oh yeah,
America
absolutely. And they're
as well as
helping,
around the world, I mean.
yeah, helping keep unemployment down and, helping to, you know, give wages to all these people. A lot of these larger corporations, while sure there are many problems with them, you know, corporate regulation is somewhere where I'm, willing to say that, you can push some regulation to kind of make sure these companies are held accountable.
Mhm.
Trying to, take 15% off their profits. It's like you want them to be reinvesting that capital back
Right, that's the
into
whole point
the
of
expansion of the economy
right,
as
it's the
opposed
whole
to
point.
all these initiatives.
Because, like, I mean, yes, a lot of these companies do try to maybe not show they turn a profit to some extent, but that money has to go somewhere, and
Yeah.
generally, it's in, pushing more money into either their own companies or promoting the economy overall.
Yeah.
Um, Here's something where I kind of disagree with you. You were talking more, and this is a little bit off topic, but you're talking about switching tax code to possibly target individuals with, credentials. Is that what you were trying to say? Or maybe where it seems more logical?
Well, I just think there should be a lot more nuance to it. We have a very binary bracket system of our tax code at the current moment. And where I think, you know, you could look for money when trying to fund some of these initiatives. Now, not exorbitant amounts like these hundreds of billions of dollars, but there's certainly places where cuts can be made that I do think would have less of an effect on the overall economy than this 15% um, take on these corporations' profits.
I agree with the concept. I totally agree with, I think that there's money to be taxed in places where it makes sense. I just think that even this 15% minimum tax on corporate profits, even adding that into tax code is already just going to overwhelm the IRS. If you've looked at
Oh,
how
no, yeah.
terribly it's been organized over the past 40, 50 years, I mean, it's just going to get worse the more nuance you add to tax code. And I think that that particularly will just cause more hell than it might better, you know?
No, yeah, yeah. No, I'm not saying that as an addition at all. I would say that as an alternative to
Okay, gotcha.
minimum tax rate. I No, both would be an awful idea.
Right.
But yeah. But anyways, mentioning the IRS brings up a whole new section of this bill. The 80 billion with a B dollars that have been invested into IRS tax enforcement.
Right?
Um, this one makes me a little bit upset, like genuinely a little bit upset.
Same,
And
same.
let me tell you. So it's ridiculous. So, you know, as many people know, for years and years, the IRS has been complaining about how they're unfunded and they can't do their job and they don't have enough people. And so, what's been proposed here is $80 billion to be spread out, invested into the IRS over the next 10 years. What does this mean? Basically, it just doesn't mean a whole lot other than they're just hiring thousands of new employees. Okay.
Well, because they had
Thousands
to
of new.
rush hire 5,000 new employees. What was it like last year as well?
Oh, yeah. And so it's all these new employees. And what does that mean? That means all these new audits. And here's the thing that's the problem with this. Okay. Any person who is well off to a degree, past a certain amount of income, or, whether it's a family unit, whether it's an individual, whatever it is, anyone who's fairly well off, and especially any company is going to hire, a CPA to do their taxes, is going to hire a firm to do all
Mhm.
their returns, to keep track of everything, to do the accounting. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
These audits will do nothing to any of these people. Okay. They, you know, have it all done systematically, it's taken care of. And even if there are discrepancies, they, have the money to pay the lawyers, to battle this out in court and to resolve this. This, you know, initiative of the bill is not going to hurt them, which is what it's designed to do. Okay. It's designed to audit all of these multimillionaires, the billionaires, the huge
Right, right.
corporations, to try and pull more money out of the top, right?
Mhm.
That means nothing because they're already, if you have any significant amount of capital,
You're
you are
lawyered up
going
already.
to, you're lawyered up and you're going to invest enough into effective accounting practices to ensure that everything is both accounted for and is able to be, you know, like not an issue when it comes to being audited or anything. And so what ends up happening is all of these thousands and thousands of new employees all have these quotas that they have to hit. And what are they going to do when they, can't audit these large corporations and these wealthy individuals? They're going to start going after middle class people who, maybe try to do their taxes themselves or don't keep great records or don't hire an accounting firm. And all of these middle class people are going to end up getting screwed by just this exorbitant amount of, increased audits, which just kind of blows my mind. It's
And
like,
then if you're auditing the middle to lower class, if that's where you have to go to hit your quotas, are you not going to be paying as a US government entity more money to go and fight these issues rather than your payout if you are, you know? Because, like,
right.
I don't know, you still gotta pay the lawyers to go to court and try and
Hmm.
actually fix these issues if you wanna get a payout as the US government. Is it
Right.
worth it? I mean, I think there's a threshold where probably yes, but you gotta think about the time, the money you're paying in every single area to get just one of these audits passed through to make a profit off of it.
Yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous. And so the other aspect of the investment into the IRS was kind of they're trying to develop software to make the auditing process more automatic and systematic, and to kind of autonomize a lot of the IRS's you know, day to day type stuff. And I'm pretty sure you've heard it as well, but there's a pretty good excerpt from the All In podcast
Mhm.
that I was listening to about how, and they've invested, obviously it's not the full 80 billion, but it's, pretty damn close. And so we don't know the percentage of it that's invested into this software, but let's say it's even half. Let's say it's $40 billion into just creating the software, or let's say it's like let's say it's 20 billion even. Okay,
Right.
let's take a fourth of the overall thing and just make the assumption that that's being put into the development of the software that they're going to be using. If you were, and this is the excerpt from that podcast that I just loved. And basically what they said is if you were to go to any of the, top software companies in the country, let's say your Google,
Oh, I know where this
Your
is going.
Facebook, anyone like that, and give them a government contract and say, can you build me a software that autonomizes the auditing process so that we can, make this, much more efficient, get all this done much faster and with, less capital investments over time, obviously we got to invest to build the software, but after that, it becomes a lot easier to manage and kind of keep this going over time. Can you do that for us? And, they're going to say, we'll give you, you know, $200 million. Any of these software companies would jump at the offer from the government to get a government contract to build them. So let's say 500 million. Okay. That is an absolutely astronomical price to ask for a software just to autonomize the auditing process. And you're telling me that with our one fourth estimate, that they're spending $20 billion on the creation of this software.
And it probably won't actually get done.
Yeah, even if they're spending 10 billion, an eighth of this overall investment into the IRS. Like, I can keep going down and down, but I'm just telling you,
It's
like the amount you would need to invest to get a top-notch software company to build this software for you could not be more than, a few $100 million.
yeah,
And
it's
you're
just
telling me
absurd.
that it takes tens of billions.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so it's it really is just circling around the problem about 1,000 times before addressing it with money,
Right.
money, money in a bill that's called the Inflation Reduction Bill. It's like, explain to me what this is doing to help curb inflation.
And a good percentage of these or tens of billions of dollars are going back and coming from that 15% minimum tax on corporate profits, which is just like
Yeah,
we said before, not helping the economy overall.
right, absolutely. So
But
it's a little bit of a mess.
anyway, there's another pretty big provision about the bill, and we got into it a little bit about big pharma and healthcare.
Yes.
The one of the big things was there's two parts of it. Big pharma gets to, or not big pharma, Medicare gets to negotiate with big pharma on prescription prices.
hmm
That's a good thing. I think
It
that's a good thing.
it actually is, and this part is one of the only parts that I think is a good idea, and it's still done kind of poorly, but it is a good idea, and it's not done quite as poorly as some of the other initiatives, I'll say.
I agree. It's a very good thing for the American population, and people will see benefit out of this initiative. But
Right.
it's just so hard when you have so many millions of people relying on something like this to get a robust. And politics is hard. We'll just say that to begin with. But it's hard to get a robust system that'll work to actually allow for this broad claim to
Mhm.
become a reality with just the normal
Right.
American, right?
Yeah, and the real catch is it's not scheduled to start until 2025, as directly mentioned in the bill, and
Right.
since this is an executive act, it really does make kind of just put it all up in the air, and so I do like the idea. I think it's good. I think it should have always been on the part of the government and even Medicare to be able to negotiate these prices of prescriptions. I
Right.
saw that it's proposed to, bring insulin down to like 30, 35 bucks a
Right. That's
month.
great.
It's like, yes, this is good. Like people need to be able to afford their prescriptions.
For sure.
That being said, the unfortunate reality is, I personally doubt that this will come to its promised amounts.
Right.
It may make a little progress, and I'm not saying I don't want it to make progress. I do think this is actually a good idea, but unfortunately, just because they've kind of put you know, the start date of introducing this so late, it it's unlikely that a whole lot is going to come out of it.
And
Unfortunately.
well, the first thing I'm gonna say about it is that, you know, it just makes sense to do this, right? Private insurance
Oh
companies
yeah.
have had this privilege for however many years, right? Why shouldn't, a government run entity have the same privilege? It's not like you're just giving people free
Hmm.
drugs, you're still negotiating about it. Like there's
Right.
still a common ground that has to come to for it.
Yeah. Absolutely true. So
Mhm.
it should have been like that to begin with. You know, I mean, at least we're coming around now, but it
Yeah.
so I am genuinely interested to see how that develops because some progress there could be a good thing, if it is to develop in a positive way at all.
Right, right. And just to put it out there, I believe that correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they're supposed to be taking a little bit off of the cap, like halfway through up to 2025, as the cap of people can play for prescriptions each year is because I think it's in 2025 the initiative reduces the maximum Medicare beneficiaries are required to pay per year on prescription drugs down to $2,000.
Okay.
Um, so I'm pretty sure it's supposed to lower a little bit as we
Okay.
get closer to that date, but it's
Yeah.
still 2025, right?
And that would certainly help to see as the years go on if we're able to get some meaningful developments, and if it ends up working, great. I'll be happy that it did. But I do have a good deal of skepticism surrounding that, at least for the time being.
For sure. For sure.
But moving on, there's one more kind of key point to this whole debacle we got
Oh,
here.
hey. Before you move on, I have one more
Yeah, what's up?
thing. We said 2025, right?
Yeah.
The elections in 2024, right?
Oh,
This is an executive order, is it not? How
yeah.
I'm not sure
See,
how that
exactly.
works.
Precisely, and it's that's the thing.
That's another thing.
The all of this can just easily be brushed off by the incoming administration, once we get to the 24 election. Even if it does end up being a Democratic candidate, like even when we've had the transfer of power between party to party, there's many times where these executive acts just get wiped off because it's a lot
Yeah,
to deal with.
exactly. It's a lot to
You know,
enforce too.
yeah, and you don't want to come in and your administration is just upkeeping the policy of your predecessor. It's like you want to be introducing your own things and be pushing for reelection.
Right.
Every politician, all that matters is getting reelected. So
It seems like maybe, pushing dates past what your administration is might be just kind of in my eyes is kind of just a possibly a false promise to possibly buy some votes. I don't know. That's just an opinion of my own.
welcome to politics, baby. Welcome to politics.
But you had something else you wanted to move on to?
Well, was just gonna kind of talk about the last kind of facet of this whole act here, and that being the newly, well, somewhat newly introduced climate and energy provisions.
Right.
The whole, deal with the Build Back Better bill was a lot, just heavily pushing, you know, environmental incentives and the, I guess, incentivizing the development and production and the research and just overall investment into you know uh, the environmental sector, that being alternative energy, and stuff like that, kind of increasing the energy security of the country.
Mhm.
And this is, in my opinion, one of the most important, let's say, political problems that we're dealing with right now is
Right.
energy security. Um, and whether, I don't care what side of the spectrum you fall on when it comes to, you know, in the environment and sustainability and all that, it's just a key concern of our nation that we need to be increasing our energy security. And, when you take a look at it from kind of the democratic side of things, there's a lot of push for, you know, investment into like environmental research and technologies to kind of help lower global warming and combat climate change and
Right.
all that. And that I think is good, and I think we need that. And I think where a lot of it gets lost is then you have people on the other side, um, just kind of saying that, oh, it doesn't matter, like, we shouldn't be concerned with climate change. It doesn't, like, it's not a problem for us right now. And what I would say to kind of all those people is it's a financial concern as well, and it's a concern for the sovereignty of our nation and our kind of our position in global politics. It's us not having robust energy security means that we depend on other countries for our sources of energy. And the reality of it is, right now, we're not past, oil and natural gas.
Right.
And unfortunately, that is, a, a disproportionate amount of that is held in Saudi Arabia. And we do not have the best of relations with all of the visits that have been going on between China as well as Russia,
Right.
and kind of the little triad that's being formed over there.
Exactly.
And so it's and kind of what the point I'm trying to make is, regardless of where you stand politically, it is important nonetheless for us to invest in you know environmental legislation and promote kind of the research and the development of these technologies, because for us to you know remain a world power, we cannot be as dependent on all of these other countries' sources of energy. And
Right.
also, the added benefit is, wind power and solar power and, hydroelectric power and all of these things. And, the improvement of battery technologies also are going to be helping the environment, and improving our own industry here in the United States.
Yeah. Not only is it a problem of, global relations and possible futures, but it's also a problem of, hey, we should probably advance technology as well, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of benefits from it, and I agree with you. I'm not exactly sure I didn't read exactly about the literature of bit too deep on this specific part of the bill or the act, but yeah, I mean, anything that follows through and promotes green energy, or at least like you were saying, securing the United States energy, I think it's a positive for sure.
hmm and a lot of what was included in here, like the um, the provisions that were made, is a majority of it is kind of rebates and credits. A lot for individuals and households, just like tax credits for switching to solar and buying
Right, right.
electric cars and stuff. There was also loans and grants given to corporations to kind of increase the manufacturing of your various technologies, whether it be kind of wind, solar, battery, and just kind of all these clean energy production methods.
Mhm.
Um, and another kind of interesting one was there's a lot of tax credits have been given to reduce carbon emissions, and they've been kind of contracting companies to come up with different methods of um, reducing carbon emissions or repurposing carbon.
Mhm.
That I am kind of interested in just scientifically because it's kind of fascinating. But
Right, right.
it's from what I've heard, it's kind of an exercise in futility because just from what I've heard, and I haven't done a whole lot of research on this yet, but it's just a lot of upfront capital into technology that we aren't quite there yet.
Right.
Whereas with all of these alternative energy methods, we are there. We just need the capital
The
to
capital for it.
expand this.
Exactly, exactly. And unfortunately, all of that sounds great and all, but going back to, what we said before, all this legislation could just, not exist in 2 years.
Right.
Hopefully, these initiatives and these ideas are carried on by future administrations, but that's not a guarantee, right?
Yeah. And really the thing I want to make clear is most of these ideas are are good ideas in my opinion. I do not agree with the 14% corporate minimum tax rate. But I do believe, and I also strongly disagree with $80 billion being invested into the IRS.
More
However,
money, more money.
I do, and so really, and, and now that I'm kind of thinking back on it, most of it, it's kind of the extension of the Affordable Care Act. Not a fan. The creation of the minimum tax rate, also not a fan, and the um, investment into the IRS, not a fan. But the thing is, none of those are really talked about a whole lot when this bill is brought up in conversation, or when it's flying around on Twitter. None of those things that I'm pretty strongly against ever really come up. It's
Right, right.
always, you know, kind of removing the price leverage of big pharma, kind of allowing for the negotiation of prices and the climate and energy provisions. And both of those are great ideas in concept. I like seriously, I really do agree that both of those are key points that we need to try to be making progress on. And that's all that people seem to think this bill is about when a majority of the money here being kind of distributed out is going into mostly other things, which is kind of
Right,
unfortunate.
right.
But
And
you know
the Go ahead.
what well, it's just classic misadvertisement.
Right, and the thing exactly, that's what I thought exactly what I was gonna say. There does seem to be quite a few things, not quite a few, but there seems to be things that definitely do go towards, either putting more taking less or putting more money into, Americans' pockets to possibly try and combat inflation, but like you just said, a lot of it, I'm not exactly sure how it's reducing inflation.
Yeah, it's a little tough, and
Like
so
yeah, like you
there we
said, the
go.
things that go around on Twitter, and wherever, they're the things that
Yeah,
actually
it's
go
all it's
towards
all
that.
sunshine and rainbows.
Right, exactly.
Just pull off the facade, and you kind of see under the hood.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
what I do want to talk about, it'll probably be our last point here,
Right.
is the University of Pennsylvania did a really interesting study on what they feel the effects of this legislation will be.
Mhm.
And I think it was a really interesting look at kind of projections on more the macroeconomic effects of, you know, everything that's been uh, invested here.
So was it a
And
survey of sorts then?
not really, more just analysis.
Okay.
And so it's what's called the Penn Wharton budget model. And basically they did some estimations, and what they were able to find is that the Inflation Reduction Act would reduce non-interest cumulative deficits by 248 billion over the budget window. This being up until 2031, and then they also found that it would have no impact on GDP, neither positively or negatively. And upon first glance, you may think, oh, okay, that's pretty good. But when you look at it in terms of scale, the percent change on inflation is statistically indistinguishable from zero. Um, on like when you plot everything out basically and do the estimation over this amount of time where the proposed changes should have by the administration's projections had an effect on the economy, when you plot everything out and kind of run the curve of what the percent change should be, the effect on inflation is indistinguishable from zero, meaning there is no effect
No
on
change.
inflation.
Right.
And in the short term, there will be increased inflation because what happens when you inject a shit ton of money into the economy to the
Yeah,
tune of,
exactly.
tens of billions of dollars. So it's projected to have a short term negative impact, raising inflation, and over the long term, its benefits have been reduced to a growth rate that is indistinguishable from zero, meaning we will have a negligible effect, unfortunately.
Right. Right.
And I did take a pretty good look into this study, and it's the only positives they were able to find is possibly a very slight um, decrease, kind of at like the 10-year mark.
Okay.
Um, but in sorry, in the next 2 years to 2024, it's projected to slightly increase. And then afterwards, there is, from their estimation, going to be a small decrease. Hopefully, the benefits are kind of kicking in. But then, where the projections are after that have been given by the administration, turn out to largely be pretty negligible.
Right. It's
The
just
only, yeah, it's
yeah.
just, yeah.
The market itself is gonna kind of eventually, stabilize itself, and I think that's kind of what possibly they're trying to project. Is that kind of correct?
Right, yeah. And which really just means that there is no need to take drastic measures like this
Right.
with such a large blanket bill that's going to kind of push capital into so many sectors. It could have very easily just been hit the key points, the points that we're kind of saying are really good, kind of broad societal um, beneficial things. Trying to get that price leverage with big pharma, as well as those environmental and climate provisions, would have been great things. And there's just a lot kind of going in behind that just kind of ruins this whole thing.
Yeah, the last thing I wrote is the last thing I wrote in my notes was there's quite a bit of fluff that probably won't actually be focused on, and
It's
then
that
stuff
pork
that just
baby, those
just
riders.
right, stuff that money's just going to disappear into. And again, like we've been saying, a lot of these ideas are great, but politics is hard. Politics are hard, and enforcing things like this is hard. So it's just going to be interesting to see how it rolls forward in the future.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, obviously, there's nothing we can do about it. So I would be interested to see how this develops in the coming years. And most, of most interest to me would be when the next administration kind of rolls around. What of this is going to stick around?
Absolutely.
What are we going to kind of see going forward? And I do still really think that the whole energy security issue is truly of utmost importance for anyone. Um, it's it really is kind of a bipartisan concern that we need to be looking at going forward because it could really end up hurting us in the future.
Yep. For sure.
But yeah, largely, I am just interested as well to kind of see as things develop. As kind of politics has become, it's you just kind of watch. It's that free entertainment, you know. You just watch, see what happens. It's a big social
Yeah.
experiment.
Oh, no, yeah.
So yeah, I do think that that about wraps it up for us, though.
For sure.
Kind of will conclude episode 3 of Dorm Room Diplomacy. Hopefully, that's a little bit a better taste of what the episodes will kind of be like moving forward. Just kind of taking a look at some of these issues, trying to, you know, figure it out ourselves, kind of dive into these topics, something we're both interested in, and then just kind of talking it out and trying to make sense of the world. And as always, we appreciate any support. You can find us on Apple Music, Spotify. Should be moving on to other platforms shortly. Should have a Twitter up soon. Go follow that. It's going to be DRD Pod. We'll be announcing, episodes. Should be putting out clips soon enough. And what we really do appreciate the most, any kind of review on Spotify or Apple Music helps us out greatly. It helps with our rankings within the algorithm and kind of pushes it out. So hopefully more people can hear our voices and we can tell them what we think about
Our
about
bad
all.
ideas on politics
Exactly.
and other things, not just politics.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, it's been episode 3 of Dorm Room Diplomacy.
See you later.